Welcome to this episode of the Harpreet Singh Show. I'm your host Harpreet Singh from Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. In today's program, we are going to London and my guest is Saurav Dutt, a well-known author, lawyer and political columnist. He has written a lot of books now and his focus is on history, culture, art, socio and geopolitical issues. So let's talk to him today and learn as to what are those issues which are dear to him, which has compelled him to write these books, fiction as well as non-fiction. So let's welcome Saurav Dutt to our program. Saurav, good evening. Welcome to the program.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Yes, good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. So let's start off with you being a lawyer. You know, you did your degree, you did your master's in law. So how did this interest towards writing happen?
Well, yes, with the law firm I was working with at the time, there was a partner who actually held a few workshops, and this individual was very interested in socio-political issues and political issues relating to things like domestic violence, homophobia, human rights. And when this person actually held a few events about those topics, I was immediately enthusiastic about them. I was enthusiastic about the domestic abuse particularly and how it impacted working women and city women at the time.
Right.
And that eventually inspired me to want to write the first story, the first novel, the first book called The Butterfly Room, which dealt with domestic abuse. It dealt with how people of South Asian descent were navigating these issues around abuse, around mental health, around gaslighting, psychological coercion. So yes, it started within law, but the human rights angle and the human rights inspiration is what led me to want to write my first book.
Okay. Which year was this when this transformation started?
So this was about 2014, and the first book was released around 2015. And initially with domestic abuse, I wanted to write a non-fiction book initially.
Right.
Which was basically about interviewing survivors of domestic abuse. But at the time, those who had experienced it, the survivors, didn't want to reveal their names and their accounts. So that's when I got the inspiration to write it as a novel, using their accounts and their stories as the basis for all of the characters in the book. And I thought this is the best way to be able to get their stories out into the public domain. So that's how that book came about.
Right. So the Butterfly Room got a lot of attention internationally, and in this you uncovered the cultural taboos, and as you talked about this particular issue of domestic violence. So being a lawyer, you know, of course, you know the jargon, you know what complications are there in the system, but towards writing a book, was there something that inspired you to come to start writing, or it just, because of your practice in law, that is what turned you towards writing a book?
Well, working within law and practicing within law allows you to obviously understand strong construction and how to put your answers forward and to understand your audience and how you write. But I wanted to lend that towards novels and the creative side of writing. That was something that was always frustrated within me. I wanted to express these very topical, significant issues of our time in a creative format, just like a film, just like how music does. But I wanted to use the novel as the basis to talk about the important issues of our time: human rights, homophobia, domestic abuse, women's rights, things like that.
So what were your observations when you wrote this book, when you met the community, and of course, as you said, the people didn't want their names to be there? How serious is this issue of domestic violence in the South Asian community in the UK?
It's extremely serious. It's actually the basis for the latest book I've written, which we'll talk about later. But it's a fact that it's still considered to be an extremely taboo subject. It's a difficult subject that generations of different ages don't want to talk about explicitly. They don't want to acknowledge its existence and talk about it at a deeper level. The statistics show that domestic abuse cases are on the rise, particularly at this current time. But it's within our communities, there's a lack of willingness to bring it out into the open, to report incidents, to escalate incidents with the law and through the police, and to even acknowledge that it's happening, and there's a big challenge there.
Right. But sort of this is across all the communities, this kind of domestic violence issue is prevalent in all the communities. Was there any specific reason that you chose the South Asian community to work on?
Well, yes, I felt there were two reasons. Myself, of course, being a South Asian and also being a man, I wanted to shed light on those issues coming from the male perspective, because there weren't enough South Asian men specifically talking about what was going on. So I wanted to come at it from that vantage point and to allow myself to be, a focal point to allow these voices to gather around and to be able to be the messenger there. But it was also just a case of knowing that as a South Asian, I come from a place where I can talk about these issues freely and with different people, and to shed light on that in particular. And I think our communities need to be able to talk about these issues more. And the format of a novel is the perfect way to do that. And that's what I found with the Butterfly. It opened up so much dialogue.
Right. So it's been 7 years since you wrote this novel, and in 2021, what do you feel? What changes have you seen in the community as far as these cultural taboos are concerned?
Well, in the UK, there's a greater willingness to at least acknowledge it's happening, that the topic around mental health and the effect that domestic abuse has on mental health is being acknowledged. There are far more groups that have been organized and charities specifically dealing with the South Asian diaspora as well. That's an extremely welcoming development. Also within India, where a lot of these cases originated, which are documented, there's a greater willingness to debate these in terms of legislation because of the media impact on India and how it was dealing with these cases. There's a greater level of scrutiny. These things are much more out in the open. There are far more activists out there and women's rights advocates and women's rights groups, and they won't be silenced anymore. They want to be heard, and that can only be a good thing.
Right. And apart from novels, your journalism essays and reviews have also appeared in international newspapers like The Guardian, the International Business Times, Times of Israel, London Review of Books, Times Literary Supplement, and many other newspapers. So as you mentioned that it's not just the domestic issues or domestic violence issues or cultural issues you have also touched upon the historical facts also, and you've written a few books on that. It's time for a break. We'll go for a break and we'll be shortly back, and from here onwards we will continue with the discussion that from the Butterfly Room onwards, how many more novels have you written, and again what has been the emphasis of these literary writings. So we'll be shortly back. ਵੈਨਕਾਸਾ ਟਾਈਲ ਅਤੇ ਸਟੋਨ ਸ਼ੋਰੂਮ ਇੱਕ ਐਸੀ ਥਾਂ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹੋਲਸੇਲ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਤੇ ਹਰ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਟਾਈਲਸ, ਸਟੋਨ, ਮਾਰਬਲ, ਬੈਕਸਪਲੈਸ਼, ਮੋਜ਼ੇਕ ਆਦਿ ਵਾਜਬ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਤੇ ਮਿਲ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਟਾਲੀਅਨ, ਸਪੈਨਿਸ਼, ਚਾਈਨੀਜ਼ ਪੋਰਸਲਨ ਜਾਂ ਸਿਰੈਮਿਕ ਟਾਈਲਸ ਜਾਂ ਮਾਰਬਲ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਆਰਡਰ ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਕਲੀਅਰੈਂਸ ਤੇ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਮਾਲਕ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟ ਟਾਈਲਸ ਇੰਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ, ਜਿਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਵਧੀਆ ਕੁਆਲਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਸਮਾਨ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰ ਦਾ ਸ਼ਿੰਗਾਰ ਬਣਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਵਿਜ਼ਿਟ ਕਰੋ 13042 84 ਐਵਨਿਊ ਸਰੀ। ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਹਿੰਦੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ 604 330 7363 604 330 7363।
ਕੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਰੀ, ਡੈਲਟਾ, ਰਿਚਮੰਡ, ਐਬਸਫੋਰਡ ਜਾਂ ਵੈਂਕੂਵਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਵਾਂ ਘਰ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਬਾਰੇ ਸੋਚ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਰੈਨੋਵੇਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ? ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਇੱਕ ਤਜਰਬੇਕਾਰ ਬਿਲਡਰ, ਇੱਕ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟਿਵ ਇੰਟੀਰੀਅਰ ਡਿਜ਼ਾਈਨਰ ਦੀ, ਜੋ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਗਾਈਡ ਕਰ ਸਕਣ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸੁਪਨੇ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਉਸਾਰ ਸਕਣ। ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ ਹਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਜਾਂ ਸੰਦੀਪ 604 825 9295 ਉੱਤੇ।
ਸ਼ਾਈਨ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਡੈਂਟਲ ਕਲੀਨਿਕ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਤਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀ ਦੇਖਰੇਖ ਹੇਠ ਆਧੁਨਿਕ ਮਸ਼ੀਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਵਰਤੋਂ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਦੰਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਹੀ ਕੇਅਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੰਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਫ਼ ਕਰਨਾ, ਕਰਾਊਨਸ, ਬ੍ਰਿਜਸ, ਡੈਂਟਲ ਇੰਪਲਾਂਟਸ, ਰੂਟ ਕਨਾਲ, ਡੈਂਚਰਸ, ਬੌਂਡਿੰਗ ਅਤੇ ਵਨੀਰਸ, ਐਕਸਟ੍ਰੈਕਸ਼ਨਸ, ਬੋਨ ਕ੍ਰੈਫਟਿੰਗ ਆਦਿ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹਨ। ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਡੈਂਟਿਸਟਰੀ ਦੇ ਵੀ ਮਾਹਰ ਹਨ। ਇਹ ਇੰਸ਼ੋਰੈਂਸ ਕੰਪਨੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟਲੀ ਬਿੱਲ ਭੇਜਦੇ ਹਨ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਘੱਟ ਤੋਂ ਘੱਟ ਚਾਰਜ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਵਾਅਦਾ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਫॉर ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਸ਼ਾਈਨ ਐਂਡ ਸਮਾਈਲ 604 503 03 20 ਤੇ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ। ਕਿੰਗ ਜਾਰਜ ਸੁਪਰ ਸਟੋਰ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ, ਯੂਨਿਟ 370 7488 ਕਿੰਗ ਜਾਰਜ ਬੁਲੇਵਾਰਡ, ਸਰੀ। Once again, welcome back to the program. This program is being brought to you with the support of AMC Insurance. If you're looking for home, auto, travel, business, life or recreational insurance, they have 9 branches in the lower mainland to serve you. They're open 7 days a week from 8:30 a.m. onwards till 9 p.m. For more information, call 604-507-6666. Our next sponsor is Day-to-Day Wholesale Cash and Carry. This is British Columbia's largest South Asian grocery store, where you can buy groceries of India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. Apart from groceries, party wear, kitchenware, homeware, and other things at wholesale prices. More than 1,000 products are displayed on the shelf. For best prices, unique grocery buying experience and high quality products, come to 7843 128th Street, Surrey. Phone number is 604 503 8787. Our guest today is Saurav Dutt, and let's get him back and continue with the discussion about his journey into writing, not only as the books, but also literary pieces in various newspapers. So before the break, as I talked to you, that social issues are very dear to you. So apart from domestic violence, has some other social issue also been covered in your writings?
Yes, history is very important. So
Right.
after the Butterfly Room, one of the most biographical story of Parminder Singh Nagra. Parminder Singh Nagra is very well known in Canada. He's a professional boxer who fought for the right to box with his beard. The Canadian Athletic Boxing Commission was trying to get him to shave his beard in order to compete, and he refused, and he fought his case all the way to the courts to be able to do this. So a film was being made and has been made of Tiger, which is Parminder Singh Nagra's story, and it has been released. And the producers got in touch with me because they saw all of the writing I had done about human rights and about all of these political issues, and they invited me to write the novelization of the actual movie. The movie stars Mickey Rourke, has been released a few years ago in Canada and Los Angeles. And that was one of the most proudest projects I had been a part of, to be asked to do that. But more importantly, one of my proudest books was the centenary of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, the Amritsar massacre of 1919.
Right.
To mark that centenary, there were a number of books which were being written, but none of them took the approach of a novel. And I wanted to present something that was new and unique, and so I wrote a book called Garden of Bullets, Massacre at Jallianwala Bagh. And that was released on the actual centenary itself, on the day, and it was launched at the House of Lords.
Right.
And it's a book I'm very proud of because it documented the massacre from multiple angles, from the angles from the Indian Army, from the Sikhs who were fighting for the Indian British Raj Army at the time, even from the British Raj perspective, and even also talking about Udham Singh and what happened when he came to England to avenge what had happened. So it was a really difficult and challenging project to talk about this historic event from so many different angles and to pay honor and tribute to the memory of those who passed away in 1919. Right. And that was a book which received a lot of attention and is an effort I'm very proud of. So I really wanted to document history of the South Asian peoples from the Indian subcontinent,
right,
and to talk about those human rights issues. So those two are very notable, and that brings me to the present day as well, where I'm come back now to domestic abuse, and I'm actually talking about a case which has received a lot of international attention, about a girl from Leicester in the United Kingdom who took her own life because she had been suffering from years of domestic abuse and psychological coercion, extortion and blackmail. And she passed away in 2016, and her mother and the family of this girl, Meera Dalal, wanted to talk about what happened to her. They wanted to create a book and a memoir which could help other men and women who are suffering from depression, from mental wellness, who are suffering from domestic abuse, and be able to get the help that they needed, and to talk about things like suicide prevention, which again, these are topics which impact South Asian communities, but we are often reluctant to talk about them in the open.
Very true. That's a major issue, a crisis in the South Asian community all over the world, not just in the UK. So when you write these books and when you talk to people, of course, some are fiction, some are non-fiction, as you said, but the issue is the basic solution for this. Is there a solution-oriented thought also? Because the journalism pieces that you write in the newspapers, do they focus on just the problem or some solution also? The political commentary pieces try to focus on a solution. They always try to offer
competing viewpoints. I think it's really important to be able to look at a perspective from two competing viewpoints. For example, in the UK very recently, there has been a drive towards pulling down statues and monuments which are problematic or deemed problematic in terms through the lens of history. And I wrote about one which was actually about the toppling of a Gandhi statue in Africa. And I looked at the approach from multiple viewpoints, pro and against, and I tried to offer an opinion whereby you could make your mind up either way as to which was the best course of action that should have been taken. So I try not to take a very one-sided view when I offer my political commentary, unless it's an issue which really hits home to me. For example, something like decolonization of the curriculum or improving knowledge about what happened in the past during the British Raj, for example. Something like that's very personal to me, so I try to offer one straight focused solution. But when it comes to the books themselves, I always try to offer some kind of solution. So with the domestic abuse novels, for example, the end of the book always signposts readers to find out more. So the most recent book I've written about the Mira Dalal case, right at the end, we give information about the Samaritans in multiple countries, and in the UK, for instance, we provide signposting to 3 major charities that can help South Asians to get help. If they know someone who is being abused and attacked or is suffering from depression and has mental wellness challenges, they're able to get help. So I try with my writing to always offer some kind of solution. But sometimes it's about the debate, and I offer the debate, which is what I did with the Jallianwala Bagh book. Of course, I looked at it from the perspective of someone who was living in Amritsar in the Punjab at the time, who wanted to seek redress, but at the same time, I can look at it from the competing opinion, the competing side, which is from the British side, and to try and look at it through the eyes of General Dyer and Michael O'Dwyer at the time, which is a very difficult thing to do for a proud Indian. It's very difficult to look at that competing viewpoint. But I felt the audience had the right. They should be able to see the story of what happened then through the eyes of competing viewpoints.
Okay. Interesting. Saurav, it's time for a break. We'll go for a break and we'll be shortly back. And in the last segment, we'll continue with what your future plans are and also your expertise in law. How has it helped you bring out these issues which are of importance to the general public? And also, we see that the print media is on the decline. But how do you feel as an author? How is this industry going forward? And we'll talk on all these issues shortly.
ਭਾਰਤ ਪੈਸੇ ਭੇਜਣੇ ਹੋਣ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਮੰਗਵਾਉਣੇ ਹੋਣ ਤੇ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖੋ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਫੋਰੈਕਸ ਨੂੰ ਤਸੱਲੀਬਖਸ਼ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਵਧੀਆ ਰੇਟ ਦੇਣ ਦੀ ਇਹ ਗਾਰੰਟੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ 6043491313 ਉੱਤੇ।
ਲੈਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਨਵੇਂ ਤੇ ਵਧੀਆ ਅਪਲਾਈਐਂਸਸ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਸਟੋਵ, ਓਵਨ, ਫ੍ਰਿਜ, ਵਾਸ਼ਰ ਡਰਾਇਰ, ਮਾਈਕ੍ਰੋਵੇਵ, ਫ੍ਰੀਜ਼ਰਸ ਜਾਂ ਡਿਸ਼ਵਾਸ਼ਰ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਪਹੁੰਚੋ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਮ ਅਪਲਾਈਐਂਸਸ ਤੇ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ 3 ਬ੍ਰਾਂਚਸ ਸਰੀ, ਐਬਟਸਫੋਰਡ ਤੇ ਚਿਲਵੈਕ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਨ। ਇੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਵਾਜਬ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਤੇ ਅਪਲਾਈਐਂਸਸ ਮਿਲਣਗੇ। ਇਹ ਡਿਲੀਵਰੀ ਤੇ ਇੰਸਟਾਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਵੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਪੈਕੇजेस ਫॉर ਬਿਲਡਰਸ ਐਂਡ ਹੋਮ ਓਨਰਸ। ਕਾਲ 6045904140 604 590 4140।
ਘਰ ਇੱਕ ਐਸੀ ਥਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਹਰ ਕੋਈ ਆਪਣੀ ਨਿੱਜੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੇ ਸੁਨਹਿਰੀ ਪਲ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖਦਾ ਹੈ। ਉਹ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਉਹ ਰਹਿੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰਿਆ ਜੀਵਨ ਬਤੀਤ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਪੂਰੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਦ ਕਿਸੇ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਨੂੰ ਸਜੇ ਹੋਏ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਬਦਲਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ। ਨਵੇਂ ਘਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਰੇਮਿੰਗ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਫਿਨਿਸ਼ਿੰਗ ਤੱਕ, ਡ੍ਰੇਪਰੀ, ਪੇਂਟਿੰਗਸ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਡੈਕੋਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਐਸੈਸਰੀਜ਼ ਤੱਕ, ਤੁਸੀਂ SK ਹੋਮ ਡਿਜ਼ਾਈਨਸ ਦੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਰਵਿਸਿਜ਼ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਸੁਪਨਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਹਕੀਕਤ 'ਚ ਬਦਲ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਕੰਟੈਕਟ ਕਰੋ ਸੰਦੀਪ ਕੌਰ 6048259295।
ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੇ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਇਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਬੈਸਟ ਹੋਮ ਕਿਚਨ ਕੈਬਨਿਟਸ ਦੇ ਸਹਿਯੋਗ ਨਾਲ। ਘਰ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਾਨ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿਚਨ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਸੋਹਣਾ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਸਟ ਹੋਮ ਕਿਚਨ ਕੈਬਨਿਟਸ ਲੋਅਰ ਮੇਨਲੈਂਡ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਜਾਣੀ ਪਛਾਣੀ ਕੰਪਨੀ ਹਨ। ਕਸਟਮ ਹਾਈ ਐਂਡ ਘਰਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਮਲਟੀ ਯੂਨਿਟ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟਸ ਇਹ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਹਰ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਕੈਬਨਿਟ ਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਬੈਸਟ ਹੋਮ ਕਿਚਨ ਕੈਬਨਿਟਸ ਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖੋ। ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ ਸੁਰਜੀਤ ਤੇਸੀ 6045918171। ਸਾਡੇ ਅਗਲੇ ਸਹਿਯੋਗੀ ਹਨ ਅਗਨੀਹੋਤਰੀ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਕੰਸਲਟਿੰਗ। ਟੈਂਪਰੇਰੀ ਸਟੇਟਸ PR, ਨਵੇਂ ਹੋ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਿੱਚ, ਅੰਤਰਰਾਸ਼ਟਰੀ ਵਿਦਿਆਰਥੀ ਹੋ, ਸਿਟੀਜ਼ਨਸ਼ਿਪ ਲੈਣੀ ਹੈ, ਹਾਇਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਫੋਰਨ ਵਰਕਰਸ, ਐਕਸਪ੍ਰੈਸ ਐਂਟਰੀ, ਸਪਾਂਸਰ ਕਰਨੇ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਜਾਂ ਗ੍ਰੈਂਡ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰੋ ਨੀਰਾ ਅਗਨੀਹੋਤਰੀ ਨਾਲ। 2006 ਤੋਂ ਸਰਟੀਫਾਈਡ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਕੰਸਲਟੈਂਟ ਵਜੋਂ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਗਾਈਡ ਕਰਨਗੇ ਤੇ honest ਤੇ reliable information ਦੇਣਗੇ। 604-597-2284 is her number. Let's get back Saurav once again and continue with our discussion. So Saurav, before the break I was asking you that do you specialize in any particular area in law or you practice general law?
It's a general. Originally it was clinical negligence or medical malpractice. Now it is corporate and insurance.
Okay. So talking about your role as a lawyer and then focusing on writing books, print medium is on the decline. That's what we are seeing. But how is it that how are the books still being accepted by the public, and what do we see in future? What is going to happen?
Well, because of the advent of ebooks and Kindles and formats like this, people are able to download books very quickly, access them at a cheaper, lower cost price, and to be able to to read books in a portable way. They're not bound to get hardbacks or paperbacks anymore. And that can only be a good thing. It allows more authors to get products out there.
Right.
And also there is one huge the advent of self-publishing is extremely large at the moment. It's on the ascent.
Absolutely.
So if you have an idea in your head and you're able to write and you can have access to good editors, copywriters, and you're able to make a good cover, for example, you can get your product out there in record time through the most powerful medium in the world, which is Amazon, to get your books out.
Right.
That can only be a good thing, because originally I started my journey as a self-published author, and then that led to a hybrid publishing deal.
Right.
But the point is, a writer no longer is bound by rules and restrictions or gateways, as the term usually is. If they have a creative impulse or an idea, they are able to act on it immediately, and that can only be a good thing.
Saurav, have you also worked on human rights issues?
Yes, primarily through charities and campaigns outside of work, and through some of the books as well, because a lot of the books, especially the domestic abuse ones, were in conjunction with charities as well. So we had charity campaigns raising awareness around domestic abuse and things like that. And the latest book as well, proceeds are going to the charity as well.
Right. So in total, how many books have you written so far?
Right, I think the number is about 5 official books, I feel. There are a few which are much more heavily promoted, such as the book on the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. And there are a few which are novels that have done very well quietly. One of the most recent books, which is doing very well actually, which we didn't mention, which I forgot to mention earlier, is a book on the Indian film actor Amitabh Bachchan. That was released early last year, and that's been doing really, really well. And it's been getting a lot of good reception. But I used that book again. It wasn't just about Bollywood. It wasn't just about Bachchan ji. It was a cautionary tale about celebrity, the cult of celebrity. It was about poverty in India. It was about farmers' loans, because Bachchan ji paid off the loans of some farmers in Maharashtra and Uttar Pradesh. And the story looked at that as well. It looked at poverty in the slums and what a person from a lower economic status can achieve if he dreams. So that was a very important story as well.
Right. And sort of your interest is in social and geopolitical issues. So what are your future plans? As India is also under your radar, you have been writing a lot of books on India, the historical perspective as well as the other issues. So any further issues which you are planning to bring forward?
Yes, so one that is currently in motion is actually a novel which is based around the current farmer protests that are happening in India. So this is a joint book I'm writing with a friend of mine called Satwant Singh Johal, who is in India, who has family involved within the protests on the ground. So I really wanted to write a novel which is a unique take on what's happening, again taking a very rounded view of what's happening in India at the moment, looking at this through the perspective of farmers on the ground, looking at this through the perspective of the women whose voices need to be heard, the wives of the farmers, and also looking at it from the perspective of the Indian government as well, So I think it's very important to have a very nuanced, balanced look, which is why I'm working with Mr. Joho to produce this. And so that's a book which we're hoping to aim to release at the end of this year.
Okay.
And that's currently at the moment going through the editing phase. So that's a very important project which I'm looking forward to release.
And COVID has absolutely stopped everything. So every communication is happening only through, the internet now. So before this, were you going to India to research for these, or sitting over here, getting the documents and going through them and then coming up with your thoughts and penning them down in a book?
Yes, very much. The pandemic has interfered with a lot of those plans.
Mm-hmm.
The book of Amitabh Bachchan, Dear Mr. Bachchan, was actually going to be promoted there, and there were representatives who were actually going to try to sell the rights to the book to production houses who could option the story. But all of that had to be halted, and also book events that were being held in the Middle East and India to promote that book were stalled. And then the most recent book, of course, which I'm researching, the reason why I'm utilizing Mr. Johal in India is because I can't go there to do any research, because we can't travel. Because he is on the ground, he is able to provide me with valuable access in terms of media contacts, in terms of research. So absolutely it's interfered with plans, but the beauty of writing and ebooks and blogging and commentating is that all you need is your mind and the internet to get these ideas out.
No doubt.
And video, of course, such as we're doing
there's
today.
An extensive reach, all over the world you can reach at the touch of a button. But before this pandemic, like for example, you talked about the Jallianwala book. Did you go over there and research, or sitting over here in England and screening the documents, you wrote this book?
Yeah. So a lot of the research happened here, for example, in the British Library, and through the many scholarly works released on that. But there was actually a documentary maker who was on the ground in Jallianwala Bagh, who went there, and in the Punjab, who I worked very closely with for the research as well. And I featured on his in his documentary as well.
Right.
So a lot of representatives went to India, went on the ground there and did research and fed that back to me too.
Okay.
But in that case, it was just about looking at all the historical records and materials.
Right. So right now, as you said, your focus is on the farmers' protest that's happening in India, and you're coming out with a book. Any other book also which you're planning in the near future?
Yeah, there's a few others which I've just released a book which is called The Winter Song, which is a novel about a widower in Simla. Okay. And that's just a very straightforward romantic story, which is for readers who enjoy escapism and just want to hear a romantic story that's set in India. It's about a widower who makes a promise to his wife on her deathbed to honor a promise that she made. To basically retrace the steps of their honeymoon in Simla, and he rediscovers things about himself.
So
and of course, there's another one.
Focus of books, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is a different shift.
Okay.
But the one that is just released is Fall in Light, the Meera Dalal story.
Okay. Now, what would be your advice to youngsters? Because a lot of blogging is being done these days. But many of them are not able to reach that level, though they might have the idea and the thought. But what would be your recommendation to them if they want to be a blogger and they want to come forward and be known internationally? What suggestions would you like to give to them?
Well, I would think the most important thing in this day and age is to offer value up front. And what I mean by that is to always think about your audience and to think about what can you offer to them or value, and add 10% of effort to that. So it's a very crowded marketplace in terms of opinions, in terms of the internet, in terms of blogs. You have to make yourself stand out. So be your own editor, do your own research, be forward thinking and proactive in terms of pitching yourself. Everyone is hungry for content, but they want to be pitched professionally with unique ideas. And of course, find your own voice, find your own arguments. Don't be one-sided and narrow-minded in your approach. Look at competing perspectives and be able to voice yourself as well. So if you get to a fortunate position where you can talk about your writing, make sure that your voice in person is as strong as that on paper. So work on your public speaking voice as well. And ensure that you carry your voice through your writing. so that if you look back on your writing in 5 years' time, you are still proud of the effort you put into it.
Great. Saurav, it was a pleasure talking to you. Finally, if somebody wants to contact you, where can they find you?
The quickest way would actually be through Twitter on social media. My handle is @SD_Saurav. And you can find me on there. That would be the quickest place to find me.
Great. Once again, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you, and keep doing the good work and try to bring out these social issues which matter to us. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you very much, Harpreet. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. ਸੋ ਇਹ ਸਨ ਸਾਡੇ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਸੌਰਵ ਦੱਤ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਯੰਗ ਆਥਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ, ਅਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਉੱਤੇ, ਜੀਓਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਇਹ ਨਾਵਲਸ ਲਿਖੇ ਨੇ, ਕਿਤਾਬਾਂ ਲਿਖੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਅੰਤਰਰਾਸ਼ਟਰੀ ਅਖਬਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੇਖ ਵੀ ਛਪਦੇ ਨੇ, ਜਿਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਕਿ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਹੀ ਇਹ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਲਿਆਉਣ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ। ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ। ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਸਾਥ ਹੋਇਆ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ ਮੰਡੇ ਟੂ ਫਰਾਈਡੇ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਦੇ 7 ਵਜੇ ਪੈਸੀਫਿਕ ਸਟੈਂਡਰਡ ਟਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਜੇਕਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦਾ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਬਣਨਾ ਚਾਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਯੂ ਕੈਨ ਕੰਟੈਕਟ ਮੀ ਥਰੂ WhatsApp at 6046037555 or you can email me at harpreetsingh@gmail.com। ਇੱਥੇ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੀ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ। ਫਿਰ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਹੈਵ ਅ ਸੇਫ ਈਵਨਿੰਗ, ਸਟੇ ਹੈਲਦੀ ਐਂਡ ਇੰਜੋਏ ਯੋਰਸੈਲਫ।
ਕੁਦਰਤ ਦੇ ਸੋਮਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਵਰਤੋਂ ਆਯੁਰਵੇਦਾ ਰਾਹੀਂ 5000 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਚੱਲਦੀ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਬਣਾਏ ਗਏ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਅਪਰੂਵਡ 100% ਸ਼ੁੱਧ ਆਯੁਰਵੈਦਿਕ ਡਾਇਟਰੀ ਸਪਲੀਮੈਂਟਸ ਦਾ ਲਾਭ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ, ਐਂਗਜ਼ਾਇਟੀ, ਇਨਸੋਮਨੀਆ, ਬਲੱਡ ਸ਼ੂਗਰ, ਕਿਡਨੀ, ਬਲੈਡਰ, ਹਾਜ਼ਮਾ, ਆਈਸਾਈਟ ਜਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਦਾ ਆਰਗੈਨਿਕ ਇਲਾਜ, ਜੋੜਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਤੇ ਸਰੀਰਕ ਮਸਾਜ ਲਈ ਕਈ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ ਆਯੁਰਵੈਦਿਕ ਤੇਲ ਵੀ ਉਪਲਬਧ ਹਨ। ਹੋਲਸੇਲ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਲਈ ਕਾਲ 604 628 2003।
ਜੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸਮੈਨ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਪਿਆਰ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਕੀ ਵਜ੍ਹਾ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ? ਸੁਖੀ ਬਾਟ ਮੋਟਰਸ ਦੇ ਓਨਰ ਸੁਖੀ ਬਾਟ ਨੂੰ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਸਮਝ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇੰਟੈਲੀਜੈਂਸ ਦਾ ਉਦਾਹਰਨ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕਾਰ ਸੈਗਮੈਂਟ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਖ ਸੁਖੀ ਬਾਟ ਮੋਟਰਸ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਨੇ ਸਰੀ ਦਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਟਰੱਕ ਸੈਂਟਰ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲੋੜ ਦੇ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲੋੜੀਂਦੇ ਟਰੱਕਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਗਾਈਡੈਂਸ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਸਪੇਸ, ਮੋਡੀਫਿਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਫਿਊਲ ਐਫੀਸ਼ੀਐਂਸੀ ਸਭ ਨੂੰ ਧਿਆਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ। ਸੁਖੀ ਬਾਟ ਟਰੱਕ ਸੈਂਟਰ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਟਰੱਕਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਟੌਰ।
ਛੋਟੇ ਘਰਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟਸ ਤੱਕ ਬਾਹਰੋਂ ਸ਼ਿੰਗਾਰਨ ਲਈ ਮਸ਼ਹੂਰ ਹਨ ਜੇਰੇ ਸਟੋਨ ਕੰਪਨੀ ਵਾਲੇ। ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨਲ, ਕੰਟੈਂਪਰੇਰੀ, ਜਾਰਜੀਅਨ, ਮਾਡਰਨ ਲੁੱਕ ਦੇਣੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ ਜੇਰੇ ਸਟੋਨ ਨੂੰ, ਜੋ ਆਪਣੇ ਕਾਬਲ ਸਟਾਫ ਨੂੰ ਭੇਜ ਕੇ ਫ੍ਰੀ ਐਸਟੀਮੇਟ ਦੇਣਗੇ। ਸਟੋਨ ਟਾਈਲਸ, ਅਰਬਨ ਸਟੋਨ, ਮੋਲਡਿੰਗਸ, ਐਕਸੈਸਰੀਜ਼, ਪਿਲਰਸ ਆਦਿ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਸਟਾਲ ਕਰਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਮਹਾਰਤ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਹਨ। 25 ਸਾਲ ਦੀ ਵਾਰੰਟੀ, ਮੇਨਟੇਨੈਂਸ ਫ੍ਰੀ, ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਅਪਰੂਵਡ ਟਾਈਲਸ ਦੀ ਵਰਤੋਂ ਕਰਕੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਵੇਖੋ। ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ 6046149231 ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਵਿਜ਼ਿਟ ਕਰੋ यूनिट नंबर 500, 1515 ब्रॉडवे स्ट्रीट, पोर्ट कुकिटलम।